In a previous video, we showed you how to sandwich a quilt. Now we're going to show you how to sew that quilt and finish it. I've already sewn most of this, but I just want to show you the two ways you can do it. If you have a sewing machine, you can just sew down and you're going to round off the corners. If you're doing it with a sewing machine, then you will have to kind of trim to about that amount when you're doing it all around the whole quilt. I prefer to serge them. So if you use a serger, you can see the serging edge not only cuts it and trims it, you can serge around the corners that way, and then you don't have to do any trimming. Once you're done with that part, this one has been serged. You want to make sure when you're doing it that you leave an opening, maybe 6 inches to 8 inches, just kind of depends on your comfort zone there. And we have to turn the quilt right side out. The way you're going to do that is you're going to reach between the 2 layers of fabric and just reach in with your hand, reach to the farthest corner and start pulling it through that hole. That's why you need a big enough hole so that you can get the whole quilt through there. Once you get the whole quilt through, you kind of have to pull out the edges, make sure that you got all the corners rounded out. It should look like this when you have everything pulled out and flat, and you can kind of just check around the edges. I usually like to put my hand in and go around each edge to make sure that everything's out. And you can see here's the opening that we left. I'd like to trim these couple threads on here, especially if we're using white on the back. And at this point you have to fold these under, and you're going to end up closing that seam. Not doing a very good job of it here, but you can see it's going to be something like that. If you look at our next one here, I've kind of pinned that. I was able to flatten it out, and I make sure that I got everything pinned securely. Sometimes I pin a little bit further than my opening to make sure that I've secured it all. And then you're going to just take on your sewing machine, you're going to top stitch around the edges, and you should be able to sew over the pins. You can take them out as you go if you want. Sew around the whole edge of the quilt. That just kind of secures that and flattens that out. So it should look like this when you're all done. You can see you don't necessarily need to use a matching thread. You can use whatever color you want, and you're going around the whole edge. Then at that point you just trim the threads you have there. At this point this quilt will either need to be tied or top stitched to secure the batting. But that is how you sew or serge a quilt.